breakaways, for some potential attacks, depending on what the situation is in the race when they get there.
And you can see the peloton now, Steve, at 340 behind the group of leaders. So the gap actually has started really dropping fairly precipitously. And it looks like, in fact, they are trying to race for the potential stage win from the peloton, with teams like Omega Pharma, Quick-Step, Gianni Mearsman, as well as Orica Green Edge's Michael Matthews.
Well, that final uphill will be interesting. 3.5% in the final 2 kilometers. A tough left-hand turn at 200 meters to go. Doesn't sound like a lot, but positioning and power will both be important in trying to pull out the stage win on a sunny stage 4 at the Vuelta a España. How do top pro teams allocate their resources and their riders between competing events such as the Vuelta, the USA Pro Challenge that just finished up in Colorado? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. Very good. Well, first of all, there are 28 World Tour events on the calendar. They start in Australia in January. They end in Beijing in October. All the biggest teams are required to send a squad to each of those 28 events. And then you have all these other things that their sponsors want, like the USA Pro Challenge. If you're an American team, it's not a World Tour event, but you have to field a team there, because if you're an American team like Garmin Sharp or Radio Shack, you want to be in that race. So basically, they have to put it all into the hopper, take that with the riders' interests as well as illnesses and injuries and various other things, and they have to do the best they can to allocate the resources, to hit all the best marks they can amongst all the competing events that they're needed at. And so it sometimes really stretches the riders and the staff quite thin.
One more question.
Oh, bonus question, huh?
And it's from the group ride. Gogo, why do you need such big headphones? Well, I can answer that. You should see the size of Gogo's ears. It takes these massive Bose-looking headphones to cover those ears of Gogo's.
This is actually all the better to hear you with, Steve, as otherwise I would not be able to hear you or the producer. Yeah.
So, loading you up with 2 questions today.
That's a big day. I want to retain veto power on any question.
No. You don't have editorial control.
Come on.
I have final cut on this one. But please tweet the questions to @BeachyGogo throughout the Vuelta, and he will do his best to answer any and all as we move along over these next 3 weeks. And the riders moving along at a pretty good clip here with 46 kilometers left to go to the finish of stage 4 in Fisterra. So the Category 3 climb coming up. They went through an intermediate sprint earlier today. There's also another intermediate sprint coming up at 41 kilometers left to go. But that's all we really have left in terms of things to look for on the road. 1 sprint, 1 climb, and then the finish in Fisterra. And the breakaway still defining the day. And you won't find a better postcard than that. Water couldn't be any bluer, sand couldn't be any wider, framed by the hills of northwestern Spain, the Galician coast. Folks still on holiday over in Spain this time of year in late August. One of the reasons they moved the Vuelta from so far deep in September to starting in the month of August, so more folks could come out and take it in.
I think it's been a good move for them personally, because it also really gave the riders a chance to focus more on the Vuelta. With their seasons being so incredibly long, if you bump that Vuelta up a little bit, it helps.
So much time for everything to come back together. Even if a team doesn't play it right and they make a mistake, they have time to recover. So there's no reason for anybody to really panic in the situation.
Indeed, and when I spoke with Neil Stevens earlier today. He's one of the directors for the Orica team, and Michael Matthews is very well suited for the uphill finish today. He just has to get over this climb of the Mirador de Ezaro. So Michael Matthews, director Stevens, he's not really sure if Matthews is going to make it over that climb. He thinks he's not, and he's just going to wait and see if he's close enough that he can get back on, or if they go to plan B, which would be Simon Gerrans. But Gerrans was in a crash yesterday, and he's kind of banged up.
Now riders grouping together at the front here, with the gap coming down close to 1 minute now. And 2 kilometers away from the top of the climb for our leaders. So it's going to really get steep here, leading up to the summit at 34.4K left.
And Steve, this is an incredibly short climb, but as we've mentioned, it's incredibly steep. So the gap being at just a minute 1 right now, it's very possible that that breakaway group will get absorbed with the antics from the peloton. Expect the peloton to go big on this climb. I don't think there's going to be any games with letting the breakaway dangle at this point. They're either going to get caught on the climb with the battle behind, or they're barely going to hang on.
Front of the race, Rasmussen, Vanender, Day, Weiss, and Vikinen. They've been out front since the 12-kilometer mark into the stage. Now down to just over 35 left, and their gap is under a minute. Come cascading down even more on this climb. The last significant road feature between them and the finish of today's stage 4.
And this is one of the most harsh climbs, and there it is. You get an idea of just how steep it is, with a Day leading the group of 5 off the front. But I think their time is numbered right now.
Vikinen at the back.
Yeah, Rasmussen already coming off. Yeah, so is Vikinen, the Finnish national road champion in that special jersey.
Now at the front, Nicolas Day, the 25-year-old French rider for Cofidis in the red, still looking pretty strong with Weiss on his wheel for BMC.
He's been with his Cofidis squad for 3 years, and trying to make his mark here today. But looking back, they know that the general classification battle is going to come charging behind.
All right. Chris Horner is in a red jersey on the left-hand side of the road. He's got his teammates at the front of this peloton. Johnny Hogerland, Vakon Soleil, they are up there as well. Saw Saxo Bank. And look how much it's stretched out behind them on this very steep climb. Almost 3 switchbacks with riders going through at this point. With the road touching 15% in some spots. Horner's in the red jersey, middle of the screen, left-hand side of the road right now, but near the front. Alejandro Valverde in a green jersey on the right-hand side of the road. Now remember, these 2 kilometers leading up to the top average 13%. One part where it gets up over 20. I've already seen it hit 15.
Yeah, indeed. And right now, those guys all just kind of looking at each other, kind of what you would expect, because it's far from the finish line at the top of this climb. So those general classification men having a good look at each other. We may see somebody else really put a dig in and try and spring free that's a little bit further down, that the general classification guys look at and say, you know what, I'm hurting too much to follow that. I don't need to follow that. I'm going to let it go.
This is the front of the peloton. Horner is still there, right near the front.
So far, it's just attrition, just guys coming off the back of the field, Steve. And a Day, maybe he's thinking he still has a shot to stay over the lead of the field, over the top of the climb.
Day, Weiss, and Vanender are the 3 riders here. Day for Cofidis, Weiss for BMC, and Vanender for Lotto Belisol. They've dropped 2 from the original 5-man breakaway.
Now, Weiss had his birthday yesterday. Turned 28 years old, so maybe he's just getting a little day-late celebration here.
Now Vandermeer struggling.
Oh, he just cracked. And that's what happens on these really steep climbs like this. You really can't get into a rhythm. You just struggle the whole way up, and they're barely moving, really. And when you crack huge, and now it's getting even steeper.
Accelerations from the general classification contenders back here in the field yet, as we're over 20% now. Movistar, Radio Shack, Omega, and FDJ, the teams out front. This is the attrition at the back of the field.
It's so hard to tell, Steve, when you look at the guys at the front, how hard they're going. But you look back here, and you can see the damage that's being done. And they've only been on this climb for just over a kilometer. Weiss now just coming unglued.
He's barely pedaling. Look at the bike going back and forth.
He can barely keep the bike moving.
That's Vikinen.
These kind of climbs, literally, you can barely get your feet over the top, and there's the peloton coming upon Rasmussen and Vikinen.
2 members of the original 5-man breakaway picked up by the front of the main field now. %. Almost standing still. Some of these guys just having all kinds of difficulty turning the pedals over, and look at this. Wow.
It's completely insane. Guys not making it, causing the log jam, and now other guys off their bikes. 28% now.
They're barely moving. Off their bikes. Almost standing still at 28% of a slope.
It's literally a walking pace. Vanendert now coming back.
And a Vaca Soleil rider going forward from the field as Vanendert goes back for Lotto Belisol. That's Nicolas Aday at the front here for Cofidis.
It looks like it may be Fletcher for Vaca Soleil. More of a classic specialist than a climber.
Aday, the last man from the breakaway. He's at the front of the stage right now, still coming towards the top of the climb.
And he's getting very close to the top at this point, Steve.
So Weiss a little ways behind him in second place on the road. And then it's the Vaca Soleil rider now in third. Still not up to the top.
So far, quite a bit of selection on the climb from the breakaway, but the field content to watch now Edvald Boasson go off the front of the field.
He could be a guy who could win this stage.
Absolutely.
Edvald Boasson, the Norwegian.
And he's coming back from that scapula break at the Tour de France where he really lost a lot of training. And when I spoke with his director just yesterday, I said, you know, how much more time does he need to get good? And he says he's getting better every day.
Well, watch for him later in the stage. It's a good finish for him. Just off the front of the field at the moment. So Aday has almost 40 seconds on this peloton. It's starting to thin. Overall leader Chris Horner is still there near the front. This is our overall leader Aday for Cofidis, who has shed the other 4 who were at one time with him in the breakaway.
It's Kreuziger on the right, out of the saddle. Horner in the middle in the red, and Boasson on the left for Sky. Nibali is just back there in the green, or excuse me, the blue jersey. Nicholas Roach out of the saddle in the green jersey is the points classification leader. Sergio Henao on the right side. Hopefully he's getting his nutrition today.
Joaquim Rodriguez is also up there for Katusha in the red and white.
And Sergio Henao is a really punchy climber. And nice to see that he is actually feeling good today after really struggling the second day, which was the first summit finish, not eating enough food.
Daniel Moreno was also there in the polka dot jersey as the King of the Mountains leader. Now the riders losing contact at the back. Such a struggle. Tyler Farah was the rider from Garmin there a moment ago, who was trying to hang on. And now over the top of the climb, this is Nicholas Aday on the descent after the 34.4K mark where they hit the summit. And it looks like the peloton will be next through.
Yeah, they're bringing back Fletcher. Roach is making another move.
Nicholas Roach in the green jersey of the points competition leads the group over the summit.
Going for mountain points, it looks like there is all he's doing, just sitting up as he leads that classification as well as the sprint classification.
And Aday with 38 seconds on that field, over the top of the climb now, but still a long way to go to the finish.
A very long way at this point. A bit of wind exposure up here at the top, and as they get closer to the coast again, they'll get even more wind exposure. Going to be very tough for him to stay away. Vikinen there coming back, the big Finnish blue plus on his back from the breakaway through the field and out the back.
So the climb really didn't do much to the general classification riders. They all stayed close with one another near the front of the peloton, and that's where they all are right now after cresting the summit of the climb. So it didn't really do any damage to the heavy favorites. And no one really made an acceleration knowing that it wasn't the finish of the stage like it was for stage 12 last year.
Yeah, it's what they end up doing. The general classification men look at each other. Maybe you get some other guys that take a big risk and try and go from far out and get a stage win. But at this point, it's just damage control for the general classification men, watching their competitors.
And now everyone chasing just this one man, Nicholas Aday of Cofidis, with 33.5 kilometers left to go. He has a 38-second lead as they head towards the finish town of Finisterre. But the main field certainly thinned out now, a much smaller group. We'll see if other riders regain contact on the descent. And plenty of time to do so, provided they are not totally shattered by that climb, which hit pitches of 28% at its steepest. The GC favorites together, 38 seconds behind our leader. Ms. Charuka of Caja Rural who attacked from the field. But not a lot of separation here at the moment.
Well, Aday could use a little help right now. He's trying to tell the motorcycle, move out of the way so I can see behind me and get a visual. There's Charuka there for the Caja Rural team, attacking on the descent of that Cat 3 climb. Used to ride for the Euskaltel squad. He's an attacking rider for sure, and it looks like he is potentially going to make his way up there to Aday. And honestly, Aday needs some help. He will not probably mind having another rider come across. Now they'll emerge from the trees as they head back towards the coast. The finish town of Finisterre actually was considered the end of the known world among the religious pilgrims at one time. It was said to be the westernmost point of continental Europe, but since they've been able to advance in mapping technology, they now know that there's a town called Cabo da Roca in Portugal that's about 16 kilometers further west, and that's actually the westernmost point of Europe. But the pilgrims, they didn't know it. They were walking for days on end. Yeah, but do they call the other town the end of the known world? I don't think so. Omega Pharma Quickstep trying to make it the end of the stage for a lot of other riders and set up Gianni Meersman for a potential stage win, but these riders at the back of the group right now, so that's not a good sign.
And that was Mearsman there, number 164, with some teammates just coming back to the group. So certainly not a good sign.
Yeah, but it's not a terrible sign, because at least he's making it back up there. They knew that that climb was going to be a little bit rough on anybody who had a shot at sprinting. And as director Rick Van Slyke said, you know, Johnny is feeling really good. He had a strong team time trial in the opening day, and he just said that he thinks Gianni really has a good shot at winning this stage.
Coming back to the group now with whatever sting that took out of his legs, how much do you think that might impact him in the finish, which is also slightly uphill?
Yeah, I think Mearsman, when he smells the finish line, I think he's going to be good. And unfortunately, this is Sammy Sanchez, and it looks like he's pulling over. The Olympic champion from 2008.
Going back to the team car, as Day now finally has company in Amats Chiruka, who's made it up to him.
Vale.
28 seconds with 28K to go for these two riders at the front of stage 4.
Well, two guys have a much better shot at making this work than one.
So, still some downhill to go before it flattens out. Small bumps and then a little uphill to the finish.
Sammy Sanchez there with his shoe off and having the mechanic do a little adjustment, probably to the cleat position. They have a little bit of rotation there they can play with.
I think he just had a rock in his shoe, and he wanted the director to take it out.
Four guys now getting away from the front of the field. Belkin man leading the charge.
Movistar, Katusha, and BMC there. Group of 5 right here.
And these are the guys that are looking for the opportunities. They're looking for the general classification men to shut each other down, and this crosswind to create opportunities to jump away and just sneak away for a stage win.
Now the gap now at only 10 seconds, but it is really scattered behind these two right now. Just the field that's in pursuit, these small groups coming forward as the pace picks up.
And this is today. It was the partial selection on the climb, but then the crosswind and rolling into the finish up and down, where guys may take advantage of the small roads and the wind.
Jose Harada is the rider from Movistar in the dark colors there with the green helmet going to the front.
And Angel Vicioso on the back there for Katusha. Right in the middle of that group was the Belkin rider, was Luis Leon Sanchez. There's another guy who has a very good finishing kick on a slight uphill.
Warner's pretty far down in the middle of that group right now.
Looks like he's on the left side of the road there. Kind of buried a little bit. And now we're going to have a couple of groups come together off the front and make it 6. Now these guys may have a shot.
They got to all work together. That's always the key. Some of the major teams represented in the move: Movistar, Katusha, BMC. Fields in the distance behind them. Still not a huge gap, but if they start to really crank it, we'll see how much leash they get.
Well, and Steve, with the crosswinds and with the somewhat narrow roads, a lot of these guys back in the peloton are not getting the draft, so they're not just getting sucked along. So a lot of guys are suffering and using energy. And that breakaway group, everybody's going to be riding together and sheltering their compatriots in the break.
So Valverde is up there in the white jersey. He's 4th from the front. Chris Horner, who has 2 teammates at the front, is much further back. He's in the middle of this group. Don't even see him at this point. He's so far buried in the middle of the peloton. 19 seconds from the stretched out field to our now small group at the front with just under 26K left. Earbuds never fall out, never stop. 24 kilometers left to go. The margin still at 19 seconds. So that six-man group that has just formed from the peloton is not really gaining much of an advantage over the field right now. They haven't been able to expand on the lead.
So far, Radio Shack just keeping them in check with two men at the front of the field. Radio Shack doesn't have to catch that group, but look at Jaroslav Popovic just ripping it right now. 72 kilometers an hour, well over 40 miles an hour. He looks back and says, oh, whoops, I gapped off the rest of the peloton. I actually want to be pulling them behind me.
Gives him a chance to take a sip, though. Catcher's breath. Single file. The speed is high here. And once they went over the top of the climb, there was a regrouping of sorts on the descent for riders who had been dropped, and then this group got away.
And every time we see that front group, we're seeing a lot of Luis Leon Sanchez on the front because he's the highest placed man in the general classification, and all things being equal, he's the fastest sprinter in that group as well. So they're not going to give him quite as much help as he would like. If they can get him to do a lot of work, maybe one of these other guys could beat him in the sprint if they stay away. Look at that, 85K an hour.
That's always the challenge for a breakaway like this. You need everybody on the same page and doing their fair share of work to stay away, but you're not always going to get that because guys know that if they take a pull and they're not the fastest sprinter, they're basically just dragging other guys to the line with them who could beat them for the stage win, so they don't want to help.
That's right, and so the way it all works out is you have to pick your shots. 85K an hour. Just a moment ago, 53 miles an hour on just a small descent.
It's always just the calculus of how much are you willing to risk losing. Because you know if you don't work, there's a chance you're going to get caught by the breakaway and you have no shot to win. But if you do your fair share and you know you're not the fastest sprinter, you may not win, but your chances are still better against a smaller group than they are against the field. So to risk losing by doing the work, more often than not, would be the better play.
Well, and it often comes down to, Steve, the play of, and if I have a really fast guy behind me and I drag this breakaway up the road and get fourth, they're not going to be happy. If I have no fast teammate behind me, then I got to throw everything into the success of this break, and, you know, hopefully I'll get on the podium.
Yeah, the overall team ambitions certainly play a role in what's going on in the field behind with those teammates, so a lot of complicating factors on whether a rider will work or not in a breakaway.
A lot of complicating factors, and we've already discussed during this Vuelta that a lot of guys are moving around to different teams, and some of those announcements have been made. Some guys are still in negotiations, so there are other complicating factors that can create, well, let's just say some unusual racing once in a while this late in the year, things you wouldn't expect.
And they're not going anywhere right now. The gap is right at 17 seconds. It's been up to 20, hovering around 19, so they're not adding to their margin right now with 20K still left to go. And remember the uphill at the finish. They will turn left at 5 kilometers to go, and then the final 2K will average 3.5%. Left-hand turn at 200 meters before the line. So kind of a long, slow drag up to the finish today in Finisterre.
And today, the man on the back is the only man who survived from the early break of 5 over the climb, the brutally steep climb of the Mirador de Izarro. But the other 4 have come up to him, and so
Horner's
that's
back
what you
at the
want.
front here. Horner's back behind his teammates at the front of this field.
And now he's got more than 2 guys on the front as well. They have to be really careful right now, Steve. They cannot completely blow themselves out because they have to control Valverde at the end of this race in particular, because Valverde is not very far down in the GC, and he's got that great finishing kick.
24 seconds behind Horner as the day started. And Horner right now with 4 teammates in front of him, 1 behind. And Alejandro Valverde 4 wheels behind Horner at the moment at the front of the field. And the gap coming down to the breakaway, just 12 seconds with under 19 kilometers now left to go on the day. Xabi Zandio is the rider for Sky, number 199 here at the back. Now we rotate towards the front. Cannondale taking up their position at the front of the group. Astana second. Sky is there. Radio Shack has disappeared back into the group a little bit now. Coming up on the final 3K.
Looks like Sky does have some designs on this stage with Wassenhagen. As he's about 10 riders back, he's got one man in front of him to finalize that lead out.
This is Cape Finisterre. And the riders coming up towards the finish. About to go back uphill. It averages 3.5% to the final 2 kilometers. The Astana team of the former race leaders, Vincenzo Nibali and Yanni Brajkovic, the team with the most riders up at the front right now.
And Steve, they're just about to start that uphill drag to the line. It's not steep, but it just takes a little bit of the edge off, and there they're starting to gain some altitude. You got to be careful. You got to wait a little bit longer in these uphill sprints.
Now people are looking around, waiting to see who's going to attack. You know somebody's going to try to make a move, and look at the spectator sitting in the gutter there trying to get out of the way.
That's not a good place to be if you're trying to get a photograph, I can tell you that much.
Argos coming towards the front now in those white jerseys. Astana in the turquoise. Katusha up there. Vacan Soleil as well. No Chris Horner in the frame at the moment in the red jersey. Danny Moreno is there in the polka dot jersey for Katusha.
Just sort of a grind here for the guys, but they do have a tailwind.
Battling a crosswind most of the day, and now a tailwind uphill, averaging 3.5%. Astana grouped at the front.
Brajkovic just pulling off now. Paulo Tirolongo coming to the front to keep that pace high for Nibali, so Nibali doesn't get swarmed.
Danny Moreno sitting third wheel in the polka dot jersey after 4.5 hours. Looks like Wout Poels, maybe Westra as well there for Vacan Soleil riding near the front. Caja Rural rider trying to make his way up. BMC is not too far away. Cannondale still has a rider. And Movistar with a man about 4 or 5 wheels back.
Very tricky finale here to control for these guys with this uphill. Guys, they tend to run out of a little bit of gas in the lead out, and then you get swarmed from behind, and everybody loses control.
Long drag in the final 2K up to the finish. There's Horner in the red jersey, right-hand side of the screen in the middle of the pack.
Right about there.
To go. Tirolongo at the very front. A few Sky Riders are there. Sergio Henao is one of them.
Wassenhagen, I see him on the right side of our screen, but he's still pretty far back, but there's a lot of time to still move up.
Gianni Meersman is there for Omega Pharma Quick-Step, it looks like, on the left-hand side of the road. Nicholas Roach is there in the green points jersey, about 5 wheels back, it looks like.
Juan Antonio Flecha now making a charge.
He's going to the front. Our first attack on the final climb, just outside of 1K from the finish.
Flecha, the aggressor in other stages, back on the attack here today.
The first Argentinian to ever win a stage at the Tour de France. Launched a move yesterday. He's on the attack again today at the end of stage number 4. And that is Jose Herrada for Movistar in the dark blue with Danny Moreno of Katusha right behind him.
Wassenhagen still up there toward the front, 6 wheels back, biding his time for Sky in the black and blue.
Now they're looking around now, waiting to see who's going to lead the chase.
And that's what happens. Now Moreno opening it up.
Moreno second to Flecha, who's trying to hang on, but he won't do it. Moreno comes up to him. Danny Moreno in the polka dot jersey, the teammate of Joaquin Rodriguez, blows by Flecha.
Moreno absolutely on fire. I don't think they
position by Danny Moreno.
And there's Cancellara leading the charge.
Trying to reel him back in at the corner with 200 meters to go, but Danny Moreno has a little bit of a gap. Can he hang on? Daniel Moreno coming up, final 50 meters. Cancellara trying to drag it back. Danny Moreno, wearing that King of the Mountains jersey, is going to hang on for the stage win in the 4th day of the Vuelta.
Nice charge there by Cancellara as well. Order coming across safely ensconced here. No big worries for him. A great finish there by both Cancellara and Moreno.
Moreno gets the stage win. Horner keeps the race lead after 4 days of the Spanish Grand Tour.
And Joaquin Rodriguez there giving the hugs to his teammate, Danny Moreno, the winner of stage number 4.
It didn't look like he wanted to lead it out, but then once he did, Daniel Moreno just blew away the rest of the field. They eventually started to reel him in closer to the line with Fabian Cancellara in 2nd place, but the man in the polka dot jersey had enough left to hang on and win his 2nd ever Vuelta stage as he wins stage 4 here in 2013 after capturing a stage a couple of years ago in 2011 as well.
And Steve, he's a multi-talented rider, 5th overall in this race last year. Earlier this year, won the Flesh Wallone Classic. He's got a lot of different talents. This time, the timing was perfect, and Cancellara couldn't get him.
A surprising lead change, even though Horner and Nibali finished in a big bunch yesterday at the end of stage 4. The Italian is now back out front by 3 seconds on the American as we move in to day number 5. But Horner unfazed by the developments.
Chris, for once I think it is literally true to say that losing the red jersey is the end of the world today.
Is the end of the world?
That's where we are.
I don't know about the end of the world. For me personally, it's not a bad thing to lose a jersey. We're talking a few seconds, and so it's actually better for me now. No, I don't have to do any more interviews after this interview with you until we get to the mountains, and then in the mountains I either climb good and take the jersey back, or I fight for place on the general classification. But in general, for the sponsor, it's a terrible thing to lose a jersey because it's fantastic for them to see the red jersey every day. But for me personally, it's almost better to go without the jersey.
This is the talk of a man who is serious about winning this Vuelta a España.
Yeah, I have good legs. They're really, really good legs. And so if the team takes care of me the way they can, then I'm sure I'll have a fantastic Vuelta.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
The ruling for the red jersey caught some people by surprise, including the man who took back the red jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, who didn't even know that he had the race lead once again. He was on his way back to the team hotel. The race organizers had to get a hold of him, call him back to the podium so he could participate in the ceremony as the race leader. Not one really for the general classification riders. We could see a field sprint.
I think we're finally going to see the closest thing to a real field sprint here today. A little bit of a downhill in the final kilometer. No big obstacles in the way. I think this one should come down to a big bunch kick.
Just 2 Category 3 climbs and 2 intermediate sprints in the 174-kilometer stage altogether that heads southeast today from the Galician coast into the Castilla y León region of northern Spain. Another sunny, warm one on the Iberian Peninsula today, and you are looking live at the main field. There is a breakaway up the road, and it's gotten the largest gap we've seen so far in the first several days of racing. At one point, it was 10.5 minutes ahead of this main peloton here. And as far as what's at stake, you have the mountain points, of course. First really true sprint stage of the race, and the red jersey could be up for grabs. Time gap still relatively small at the top of the standings, so with time bonuses for winning the stage, we could possibly see it change hands. But on balance, you got to like Nibali's chances of hanging on to it at this point with likely sprinter stages over the next few days.
Indeed, I think that it would be a pretty big surprise to see Nibali lose the jersey. It's not as tricky a finish as it was yesterday with the last 2.5 kilometers going uphill. Not steep, but enough to create a little bit of separation there, which caused that jersey to change shoulders.
Now, some aren't totally convinced that it's going to come down to a sprint. And that's because even though it's just those 2 Cat 3 climbs out on the profile, the road isn't flat on the run-in to the finish. It's undulating. There are some turns, and it's that unpredictability that the organizers have built into a stage just like today that makes it up in the air, that just leaves that X factor dangling out there. Sometimes in a Grand Tour you have a stage where it's flat and you know it's going to come down to a field sprint. Today it's a likely sprint, but you don't know for sure.
That's right, and there are 3 primary teams that don't want anything to stay away today. That would be Garmin Sharp with the American Tyler Farah, Quick Step with Johnny Mearsman, and of course you don't want to forget Orica Green Edge that has Michael Matthews. Those are probably the 3 marquee sprinters in the race.
Had a 5-man breakaway each of the last several days. This is the signature move here today with 65 kilometers left to go. The one name that popped up on the screen that you might remember is Nicolas Adet, the 25-year-old Frenchman for the Cofidis team. He's been in the breakaway the last 3 days and certainly was the most aggressive rider from the breakaway yesterday. He was in 3 separate moves throughout the stage. Tony Martin of the Omega Pharma Quick Step team, the German, back in the field here. But as far as that breakaway, as you might expect, nobody really threatening the general classification. Well down in the overall stand.
And in fact, Nicolas Adet, 20 minutes back, is the highest man in that breakaway group on the general classification.
Now the overall jerseys right now, Danny Moreno wearing green. He's leading the points competition after his win on stage 4 yesterday. Nicholas Roche, winner of stage 2 in the polka dot jersey, leading the King of the Mountains. And of course, Vincenzo Nibali back as the overall race leader for the 2nd time, wearing the red jersey today. As we dip inside of 65 kilometers left to go to the finish. They just went through the first of the 2 intermediate sprint points on the day, and here is Nicolas Adet. Well, he rode so hard yesterday in the first breakaway. Once that came apart, he was on his own. Then other riders came forward from the peloton. He joined them. That disintegrated. He was still out front by himself all the way until late in the stage, but still has the legs to be out there once again on stage 5 here today.
Yeah, he's got to be feeling pretty darn worked over after the big day he had yesterday. But some guys, you'll see them day after day. They just get in that habit and they just keep going for.
Now the field right now content to let that breakaway hang out there. Very settled for the day right now, and we are underway with our the Vuelta here on Universal Sports. Tips coming up here on Universal Sports at the end of September in the heart in Florence. Some gorgeous scenery, and as we see some rain for the first time coming down on the peloton here in stage 5, something to note about the World Championships is a lot of different. That it's a good course for them. Not the true sprinters, but there are a lot of stage racers, there are a lot of climbers, a lot of the marquee names in the sport, both on the women's and the men's side, who really like the course in Florence.
It's typical of a road race at the World Championships to have a circuit that has some climbing and just throws quite a bit of unpredictability at the riders. They want to make it a type of race that allows a lot of different riders a chance to win. They're always very under control.
So our leaders now on the lower slopes of this Category 3 climb, the Alto de Padronello. Not a particularly difficult climb. An average of 2.5%, so it's not going to make a huge selection. It does get steeper towards the top, but most of the sprinters should be able to get over without any problem. Still a long way to go to the finish once they get to the summit, but for the first time we're starting to see raindrops falling on the peloton here, with Garmin Sharp leading the way for Tyler Farah.
Johan van Sumeren back to the front. He's been up there for a bit. later in this race doing some big turns on the front. 20 minutes down in the general classification, he sits, but that's not what he's here for. He's at the Vuelta to ride in the service of Tyler Farah on these sprint days, to bring back those breakaway groups and get his sprinter in a position to win.
An intriguing dynamic, because we've seen Garmin Sharp most of the way riding at the front to control the gap to the breakaway. When you have a stage that you feel is going to come down to a field sprint, and you have a few different sprinters who have a victory in mind, how do you get different sprinters' teams to share the load? How do you determine which team is going to do the riding at the front? Because so far it's been all Garmin Sharp.
Well, there are two things that come into play: bluffing and showing your hand, and making, talking with other teams. And so sometimes it's just the first team that goes to the front and says, we want it. Then the other teams sit back and say, okay, they've shown the interest and we're going to let them work all the way to the end. A lot of times what will happen is, before you put your team on the front like Garmin Sharp has done, you'll get with the other sprinters teams and you'll say, hey guys, Omega Pharma Quick-Step, you've got Johnny Mearsman. Orica Green Edge, you've got Michael Matthews. Why don't we each throw two guys in up here and bring this break back together?
So far it's been largely Garmin Sharp. Orica does have some men up there who've been lending a hand.
Yeah, but we have not seen a lot of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step on the front today, and they've done some work in the other days, but so far have come up a little bit short.
Now this main field not yet on the climb. Our 5 leaders have started the Category 3 climb, but not this group.
Yeah, that's what's always so interesting about these races, when you look at the riders climbing and they're not yet on, quote, the climb that the race is calling the climb. And there's just a lot of this stuff out there.
Working for Tyler Farah on the Garmin Sharp team, hoping to get his 4th ever stage win at the Vuelta. He's won stages in all 3 Grand Tours, 2 at the Giro, 1 at the Tour de France. But it's been a tough couple of years for him. And it seems like this year he's just missed out at some of the big races. 2nd, 3rd. He's been in good position. He just hasn't been the fastest guy at the line. And a win in a Grand Tour near the end of the year, I'm certain would be a boost to his confidence, and probably something he could use.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually spoke with Matt Wilson, one of the directors for Orica Green Edge, as the KOM here. Looks like Nicholas Aday, no problem. And most aggressive rider from yesterday as well. That's why he's got a red number. But Matt Wilson, the director for Orica Green Edge, the team of Michael Matthews, maybe the fastest guy in the race, maybe not. We'll find out a little later today. I asked him who he thought the major competitors were if there were a sprint today, and the first guy he said was Tyler Farah. He said Tyler's been looking pretty good the last half of the season, and he thinks he's the man to beat today.
Working our way through the field up towards the front. Casual pace in the peloton. Doesn't it always seem, though, that anytime we have a stage where the profile says, all right, could be a field sprint, but there are some features and things out there on the road that may not let it come down to that. When we have those scenarios, it seems like more often than not, we don't get the field sprint. We do find some kind of a surprise, whether it's this 90-degree corner that comes inside the final kilometer, whether it's those undulating roads towards the finish. It seems as though we always have something that is somewhat of a surprise that keeps it from becoming a field sprint.
Yeah, it very often does happen that way. I totally agree. And there are a couple of decent-sized bumps right in the final 10K of the race today. So in the final 6 miles. So it is certainly possible that the sprint trains will get disrupted, or the sprinters will get flushed back a little bit in the peloton and not be able to make their way back up to the front. But I do think we're going to have a big bunch finish today.
dynamic at all, that we don't have some other top sprinters in this race like a Mark Cavendish or a Marcel Kittel, guys like that who are right now the fastest riders in the sport and whose teams are so dedicated to them in terms of the lead out? Do you think that has an impact on whether or not a stage like today comes down to a sprint?
I don't think it really does. I mean, look at Van Sumeren on the front in the rain. Look at his face. Yeah, it may be pretty easy sitting in the field, but he's putting in a massive amount of work up on the front. And now we got a man back here with a wheel problem. It looks like he's maybe asking for an entire bike. I don't think it's going to make a big difference on a day like today.
So it is a brand new bike for Dominique Nares of the BMC team.
Well, that's pretty interesting because Nares was the man that was 22nd yesterday, and he was the guy that was 1.01 seconds behind who was 21st, and that's what caused the gap.
As the field goes over the summit of the Category 3 climb, a little more than 3 minutes behind our 5-rider breakaway. And that's one of the things that is a little unsettling about the way they determined that time in the two groups with Nibali and Horner yesterday. The two groups came across the line by pure luck, by happenstance. You had the guys at the back of the Nibali group who just, by luck, happened to be side by side instead of in a row. If one of those guys would have just trailed off or stopped pedaling 2 pedal strokes earlier, there wouldn't have been that gap, and there wouldn't have been 2 groups. Everybody at that point was coasting to the finish line, and by happenstance, it just happened to be that guys were side by side instead of wheel to wheel, and that is what put Nibali back in the red jersey.
Yeah, and that is, it's amazing that that little difference could make such a big difference for the red jersey, but literally 0.01 seconds, that's not much time. I mean, if one guy had been a foot further back instead of all being side by side in that first group, they would all have the same time.
Everybody over the top of the climb now. And the gap under 3 minutes with 26 kilometers left to go, but still some rolling roads out there as they head southeast towards the center of Spain here today on Stage 5. Well, keep this in mind. The final 10 kilometers constantly up and down. They'll hit a stretch of 1.5K that averages over 4%. That comes with right around 6 kilometers to go to the finish. Should have a tailwind at that point. And then a 90-degree right-hand corner with 600 meters to go to the line as well. So some features there near the end that could change the course of this stage. Intermediate sprint coming in just about 2 kilometers. General classification riders and teams just sitting back and letting the sprinters do the work at this point. Next big GC battles expected to come this weekend.
I'd be real curious to see if we get the Argos train lined up at the front at any point here in the next handful of kilometers with Warren Barguil, their Frenchman, who is a pretty fast sprinter, young guy, and he's really in this Vuelta as part of his development. The Argos team bringing a bunch of young guys to this year's Vuelta.
And headed towards Sanabria, the Lago de Sanabria, the big natural lake in this part of Spain. One of the biggest lakes in the country, but not there yet. Still with some business to finish off, and that is bringing back that breakaway. But Orca Green Edge very intent now. Just about all their riders at the front of the peloton peloton to try and bring back these 5 as they hit that intermediate sprint point. And Arnaud Courtier, 24-year-old Frenchman, first through for the FDJ squad.
Arnaud breaking his collarbone in January in the second day of the Tour Down Under. And that didn't really start his season off on a great foot.
Now, a lot of times when you get injured early in the season, you're playing catch-up the rest of the year because you don't want to miss a lot of training or a lot of races, so you sometimes rush back and you're never fully healthy.
Certainly can really make a mess of the first part of your year. Quite often what we do see, Steve, is guys are actually able to recover from a really early season injury like in January, like he did, and come in so fresh mentally and physically late in the season that they can pop off some great results. But some guys just never really get it back on track.
Under a minute now from this field to our breakaway. Say it so often. The teams that do the bulk of the work out on the road throughout the day to bring the break back many times miss out on a stage win because of that at the end. You've seen Garmin Sharp out there. You've seen Orica Green Edge. 2 teams most prominently doing the heavy lifting to bring back this breakaway, which is down to just 51 seconds up the road now. Will it cost them? Will other teams play off their work, exploit it, and use it to their advantage to get a stage win? As a Cofidis rider is getting some help back here. Adrien Petit, Frenchman, in the cars as he works his way back to the field with 11K left.
Steve, the chase and the lead out are this incredible dance of timing and strength. And if you get up there too soon, you can burn your guys out, and you don't have the freshness for the really high speeds on the run-in. If you get up there too late, well, if some other team takes control of it, they may be going so fast that you cannot physically get your team organized and haul them to the front of the field. And so there's all sorts of problems there. And if you get up there too soon and you don't have the speed, then you get swarmed either way. So it's about timing, and it's not just the same every day. It's different every course. It depends on the other team's goals and everything else.
So the Frenchmen get the top honors in the sprint a moment ago. Standings making it official. All right, coming up on the final 10 kilometers, and again, very up and down terrain to deal with.
Steve, I do believe that Michael Matthews is the man to beat today. Got a couple of wins in the Tour of Utah, and when I spoke with his director, Matt Wilson, as the stage was just getting rolling this morning, you know, he was pretty confident that the team was going to be good. And I've seen Matthews there riding very poised. He's a very young guy, but he's got great speed, and a former champion of the world as an under-23 rider. He's really good at the slight uphill sprints. But yesterday he just didn't quite get it because 2 guys had popped off the front, Cancellara and Moreno. He led in the rest of the group.
Oh, now here's Courtier, the Frenchman, really accelerating now. The main field about a kilometer behind these breakaway riders with 10K left to go. And we finally hit that point where one rider in the move said, enough is enough. I don't want to get caught. I'm going out on my own. This is the 24-year-old who has launched a bid here to go clear the others.
Yeah, taking one of those bumps in the road and using it as a springboard, you can see just how tired the rest of that group was, exploding and splintering into groups. Jurgen van der Walle, the 36-year-old veteran for Lotto Belisol, trying to mark him, but so far, it's not happening.
Now this young Frenchman missing almost 3 months because of his early season injury. Now trying to come back late in the year in a solo move here, leaving his 4 breakaway companions behind with just inside of 10 kilometers left to go to the finish of stage 5.
It leaves Simon Gerrans on the front now for Orica Green Edge. As you can see, another of his teammates just peeling off after a big effort. And he's still got a ways to go. And they don't have that many guys left on that Orica train.
Second rider now on the road is Lotto Belissol's Jürgen van der Walle from the breakaway. A pretty healthy gap between the two here at the front of the stage. Peloton inside of a minute back. Soleil rider just off the front, about to be picked up. Movistar also coming to the front in those dark blue colors with the green helmets. Just going inside the 9K banner for our leader from FDJ. Remember, the road's still rolling up and down the rest of the way. No categorized climbs, but not much flat either. And sometimes that can be almost worse at the end of a stage like this. They will hit a stretch of 1.5 kilometers of road with right around 6K to go to the finish. That averages over 4%.
Yeah, it's a nice little bump, and then there's another one after that. So it's by no means flat. You're absolutely right, Steve. Makes it very tough on a solo rider because he has to drive down hard on the pedals on these descents where the guys in the peloton that are sitting in are coasting. And then he has to keep on the power on the climb, and that makes it very tough.
Just over 50 seconds behind at the 9K banner. It's not like it's an individual time trial on flat roads where you just bury yourself and try to stay aerodynamic the whole way through. You have to deal with the undulations in the terrain. You have to absorb it and try to power through.
He's doing a fantastic job right now, but it's the uphills that I think are really going to hurt him.
Yeah, he's about to get to this stretch here that's averaging over 4%. And they are flying behind. Orica Green Edge once again controlling the head of the peloton. Back on Soleil and Movistar just in behind. Other riders from the breakaway, no doubt getting scooped up shortly. This is the only man left at the very front. Jürgen van der Walle in the background there, trying to hang on. But what was once a 5-man breakaway for most of the stage has come apart under the pressure of this attack by Arnaud Courtier, the 24-year-old Frenchman for FDJ. The other riders from the move dropping off. And the peloton picking them up on the road. 7K remaining, a 45-second difference.
Well, with van der Walle being so close behind, and there goes Nicolas Aday being picked up from the breakaway, the man in red for Cofidis. But honestly, with van der Walle so close behind Courtier, at this point, he's probably a little bit disappointed they weren't together the last handful of kilometers, trading pace.
Yeah, they've been just a few seconds apart, but you're stronger together than you are apart.
Indeed, you get that rest when the other guy's on the front. And he just continues to persist. He's making van der Walle ride all the way up to his back wheel.
And the field taking more time back. It's almost half a minute now with 6.5K left. Road not doing the breakaway any favors at this point either. So van der Walle has gotten on to the back of the Frenchman. And now what can they do together here? And now the situation is that it might be tough for van der Walle to take some pulls because he had to work so hard to get back onto the wheel of the FDJ rider too.
Yeah, both guys in the wind, so they're both flogging themselves, and then they get together. And Courtier doing his best to keep pulling there for a while, and now van der Walle comes to the front. So they've done a great job to hang out there, Steve, but watch this peloton as they approach the left-hander or the roundabout here. And now picking up another man from the breakaway.
Piedra. goes backwards, and Peloton scooting forwards. Just about 20 seconds behind, so they can just about see them up the road.
Indeed, on the longer stretches, they'll certainly see him, and on the uphills as well when the speed is lower. Also back in the peloton, keep your eyes out for Van de Walle's teammates, Lotto Belisol, because they have Greg Henderson, who's a very good lead-out man for Andre Greipel, but he's a good sprinter in his own right as well. They don't have to do any work right now because they have Van de Walle off the front. So Lotto Belisol can just sit back, relax, and ride the train and see if they can take the lead in the final couple of kilometers.
Coming back with 5.5K left. These two losing their advantage. Last two from a 5-man breakaway.
And this is one of those bumps that are so incredibly painful when you've been off the front all day long and you just can't keep the intensity up anymore.
And now Omega Pharma Quick-Step with the light blue on the shoulders for the first time, really bringing some riders to the front to ride for Gianni Meersman.
Yeah, Tony Martin just about to hit the front. And, you know, let's look back at some of the things Tony Martin has done for Mark Cavendish over the years, both on this team and the HTC High Road squad. He was a great lead-out man, not in the final kilometer, but up until that point, because he's got such a big engine. He can get on the front and drill it so fast that nobody else can attack.
Final 5K of stage number 5. 2 leaders with a dwindling advantage. The field just seconds behind. Still some up. A 90-degree corner inside the final kilometer. And Omega Pharma Quick-Step taking control at the head of the peloton.
It's Tony Martin as he's up there, 70K per hour, between 40 and 45 miles an hour for the chase right now, Steve. And the reason why, when you asked me earlier today what chances I give the break, and I said, a 1/10%, is just this. They're still out there with 4K to go. There's a chance, if everything went just right for them, they could win, but it's highly unlikely.
There's a slight uphill between 3K and 1K left, and then slightly downhill from there to the finish. But that 90-degree corner coming with 600 meters to go to the line. And just about to bring them back once and for all. Poitier and Van de Walle. They know it's up. Garvin Sharp, Orica Green Edge, and Omega Pharma Quick-Step, the 3 teams doing most of the work today at the front of the peloton. And it's Omega Pharma Quick-Step, the team that's at the front when they finally bring back the residue of what was once a 5-man breakaway for most of the stage, and now it's all come back. This is the front of the race with over 3K left.
I think residue is the perfect word because those guys probably feel like residue of their former selves, the way they started the day and all the work they did until they just got caught.
So Gogo, does it stay this way all the way to the finish, or are you looking for some surprises maybe from the field before we get there?
I'm not. I just am not. Tony Martin on the front is going to keep it fast. He's got a couple of teammates behind him there for Gianni Meersman, so they have strength in numbers. There's a bunch of Orica guys up there as well. You see the Cannondale men up there as well. Just one of those in the green. That may be Guillaume Bavon, the Canadian sprinter on that team. Riqueze for Lampre in the pink would be their sprinter.
All right, this is that uphill that goes for about 2 kilometers. And then once they hit the 1K to go banner in the red kite, it'll go downhill slightly all the way to the finish. And that's why they're spread out along the road here, because they're going uphill. The breakaway has been brought back. And nobody going off the front right now, even though we don't see one team in firm control at this point.
It's faster, I think, than it looks. And there's the attack.
Euskaltel.
Good luck, buddy, but I applaud the effort, and they're giving him a shot at it. No quick reaction.
Well, it's up to the sprinters teams. The other squads, the teams of the GC riders, they're not going to lend a hand. If the sprinters want it to come down to a bunch finish, they're going to have to work together to bring him back. The Euskaltel team disbanding at the end of the year, so looking for some final moments of glory. The team of Sammy Sanchez, who lost time earlier in the race, so they're already on the back foot. So Pablo Urtasun in the orange and black going forward. Argo Shimano, the team in the white, finally organizing things with 5 riders at the front with inside of 2K left. They have Nicholas Arndt, Warren Barguil, 2 riders who could factor in the sprint. Reinhard van Rensburg as well. Urtasun, a small gap, but it's going to be tough to hold in the final kilometer and a half.
Urtasun started off the season really strong, Steve. Way back in April, winning the stage 1 of the Vuelta Castilla y León. Finished 4th overall there after being in the jersey for a day. 2nd in Classica Primavera, also in April, but he is going to come back under the impetus of Argo Shimano. I just noticed also Philippe Gilbert. He's on the left side of the screen, out of the saddle. Maybe he's going to give it a shot.
Oh, he is. Gilbert is launching an attack with just over 1 kilometer left to go. Desperate to finally get a win in the rainbow jersey of world champion.
He picked up 2 stage wins at last year's Vuelta, and they were the first wins of his career, or of the year for him, I should say, before winning the Worlds. And he's back in a very similar place this year.
So inside of 1 kilometer left to go, the road will start to go back downhill, and almost 90 degrees is the corner right there, with about 600 meters to the finish line. And Gilbert has been caught and passed. Argo Shimano now at the front after 4.5 hours. Vaca Soleil is there, Omega Pharma Quick-Step and Orica Green Edge, as well as Team Sky with Edvald Boassenhagen as they set it up for the field sprint. Argo Shimano with 2 guys at the front.
Third wheel is Michael Matthews. Look at him on the right side of the screen.
Matthews now up along the barrier. He's engaged in the sprint. Gianni Meersman coming up from behind him. It's going to be Matthews. It's going to be Meersman. Also Ricchese and Lampre there battling, but it is Michael Matthews of Orica Green Edge who gets the win in the field sprint on stage 5.
Well, I have to say, Matthews was very patient. He showed a lot of seasoning there as a pro, because his team, Orica Green Edge, was out a lead-out man. He freelanced off of the Argos lead-out, timed his sprint, and had the legs to make it happen.
They finally got the field sprint they wanted, and Michael Matthews got the victory he was looking for. It's the first ever Grand Tour stage win for the 22-year-old Australian on the 5th day of his first ever Grand Tour appearance, as he is the Earbuds Performance of the Day, winning the field sprint.
He comes from 3 wheels back, doesn't have teammates there at the end, jumps into that final left-hand bend, Gianni Meersman on his wheel, and for a while there, it looked like he was going to be pretty close, with Ricchese coming up on one side and Meersman on the other, but he holds him off pretty handily and gets that first Grand Tour stage win in his first participation.
Ricchese and Meersman bumping shoulders just behind Matthews, who is still, nonetheless, the performance of the day, brought to you by Earbuds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop.
And his team did a great job to get him in position there at the end, but unfortunately they didn't have anybody still left to lead him out, so he worked it off the Argos lead out, and it all came out good for him.
This has been my goal since the start of the year, to come to the Vuelta in good form, and yeah, everything leading up to this point has just been progression to get me to this level, and the team's been awesome through my progression this year, and yeah, I couldn't have got this win without them. They rode all day, they put all their effort into the final, and yeah, I was just really happy to finish it off for the team.
The lesson is clear. Yesterday, you're third. and sometimes job has success.
Yeah, yesterday didn't quite fold out the way we wanted it to, but yeah, that's racing, and yeah, today we just wanted to try again, and yeah, we had more of a chance today than yesterday, so yeah, we put all our eggs in the basket for today, and yeah, came out with the win.
I suppose you'll dedicate this win to your fellow that fell yesterday.
Yeah, he's has a broken collarbone at the moment, so yeah, I wish him a fast recovery, and yeah, this win's for him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vincenzo Nibali is still the leader by 3 seconds over Chris Horner, 21 over Alejandro Valverde, so there were no gaps and there are no changes in the overall standings. Glad to have you with us as they roll towards the town of Caceres today in western Spain. Nibali, the leader, wearing red for the 3rd time after surrendering it for 1 day to American Chris Horner, but now safely at the top of the standings. He expects to hold that jersey for at least the next few days, if not longer. He has a 3-second lead over Horner, 21 seconds on the former Vuelta winner Alejandro Valverde. 17 riders altogether are within 1 minute of Nibali's lead. And this is live with our lone leader. Only one man in the breakaway today, Tony Martin of the Omega Pharma Quick Step team. His lead 3.5 minutes on this main field as we dip under 50 kilometers left to go on what is a mostly flat stage. There was some elevation earlier in the day, but this may be the easiest stage so far in the first 6 days. No categorized climbs, 2 intermediate sprints that they've already gone through. This is one of those textbook days for the sprinters.
Indeed it is, and when you have only one man off the front, even though it's the 2-time reigning world time trial champion Tony Martin, it's very easy to control one guy. A team puts a few men on the front, they can bring him back quite easily. I feel a little sorry for Tony Martin out there all by himself, I have to say.
Several different teams riding at the front of the main field right now with that 3.5 minute margin that's coming down. And what's at stake, you ask, for this stage number 6? Well, 33 points up for grabs in the green jersey competition, which is pretty tight at the top. And it is a stage for the sprinters who don't want to miss out, given the fact that this is more or less a Vuelta that's for the climbers, with a dozen uphill finishes, very mountainous, very difficult. So the sprinters, without a lot of opportunities to begin with, don't want to miss out when you have a golden chance like they have today.
Indeed, most of the sprinters have been scared to come to the Vuelta this year because it's such a brutal climbing race. So for those sprinters that did decide to go to Spain, well, days like today, these are the days they have to capitalize on.
Yesterday was our first field sprint, won by Michael Matthews, the Aussie for the Orica Green Edge team. Clearly proved that he was the fastest man in the bunch, and given what we saw transpire, no reason to bet against him today, is there?
Not really, and there are a couple things that can happen if you have a guy who won yesterday like Matthews did, and one of them is that the other teams can say, well, all right, we have proven there's a little bit of a sprint hierarchy, so no other teams go on the front to help chase. But by the same token, it looks like the Argos guys have decided they're going to ride on the front a little bit to chase Tony Martin.
The other side of that argument for Orica Green Edge is they say, well, you know what? The pressure's off us. We've already won a stage, so if you guys want to win a stage, you ride at the front. We're going to sit back.
Yeah, it's kind of the Simon Gerrans approach this morning before the race, as he said, okay, we got our stage win, so now the pressure is off us. But I honestly think that that's kind of a bluffing technique. I think that Orica is the team that probably wants to try and rack up more stage wins with Matthews. I think they feel that they have the speed in the 22-year-old Australian, and so they've got to bluff their way into that so they don't have to do too much work on every one of these days that's a potential sprint finish day, or else they'll run out of guys even early earlier than they did yesterday. I mean, he had to freelance that sprint at the end of the day because his guys got burned out.
And it's an interesting psychology because other teams have to read into that bluffing game and decide if they're bluffing or if they are not. And you have to believe that it is a little bit of a mind game because Orica Green Edge doesn't have a real GC rider, so they're betting everything on the sprints. And with only a few sprint stages, why would you just be satisfied for one? Why wouldn't you go for more? So those other teams have to be thinking, okay, Orica's going to be up there. They're going to try to get Matthews another one here today as well.
Yeah, and you thought poker was complicated. Try doing bike racing.
A lot of hands, a lot of poker faces to be played out there on the course. So with 46 kilometers left to go, the day pretty much settling in for the field that is just over 3 minutes behind a one-man world time trial champion, Tony Martin.
The 2013 Vuelta a España on
Tony Martin, whose lead is under a minute. As we are inside of 30 kilometers left to go to the finish in Caceres here on stage number 6.
There's that sticky bottle we were looking for just a minute ago.
Well, throughout the Vuelta a España, we are inviting you to tweet in your questions or comments for GoGo here. And the most recent one coming from Luke Danielson. What stage of this year's Vuelta do you think a rider will try to take ultimate control of the race in? Who do you think it will be as well that will try to grab the race by the throat? So, GoGo, what's it going to be?
Schlanger, I think that you're going to be going for it in stage 15 because there's 4 Category 1 climbs there and it finishes on a Cat 1. But I think I'm going to wrestle it back from you on stage 20 on the Angleroo climb.
Is that your way of dodging which actual rider is going to try and do that?
I actually think that you can't really wait. Nobody can have complete control of the race until stage 20. The Angleroo is one where it is so tough, and it's 3 weeks into the race that if a guy cracks, he could lose it. So I think we have to wait for that final mountain day. And Cycling Luke, maybe that's Cycling Luke right there. And I think that's the day that we have to wait for. And I think it's going to be Nibali, honestly.
The only thing I'll say to that is, so often we come into a Grand Tour and we talk about the last mountain stages and how it's all going to come down to that. But what ends up happening is we see earlier in the race who are the stronger riders, who are good in the mountains. And by that point, once you get to the final weekend, the general classification has already taken shape, and we don't see guys losing it. We don't see somebody falling apart and the jersey really changing hands. We see who's good early, and they tend to just maintain that throughout the rest of the race and not have that bad day where they lose the race on the final weekend.
Exactly. And that's why when you said yesterday you wanted people to stump me, there's no real answer to that question because the way it works out, a rider sees the race unfold day after day and they find a chance to seize the moment, and that's what ends up making the race. They don't look at the course and say, I'm going to win this race overall on this day. Last year at the Vuelta stage 17 to Fuente Day, a medium mountain day, there's no way anybody would have thought that Alberto Contador would have seized the moment there, won the stage, and won the Vuelta. It was one of the easier mountain days. But that's the day where he made it happen. And that's why Cycling Luke 2000, he stumped me. There's no way to answer that.
See the difference, just about 14 kilometers left to go, and there they are right behind him. In the white. A couple of different sprinters on that team, but riding for Ramon Sinkeldam today.
They kind of have a trifecta of potential sprinters on that squad, a young squad. They're just trying to mix it up and try it with different guys for a number of reasons. A, to give them a shot at a stage win. B, to just work on combinations of that lead out. It's so incredibly difficult to get your timing right, not have other guys bump into the middle of your train and get your guys separated. It's just a massive battle in a field sprint.
Just over 3.5 hours to cover this distance of 175 kilometers, down to just about the last 13 now. Coming into the outskirts of Caceres in western Spain here today. No trouble out on the road, no crashes, no technical turns like we've seen earlier this week.
Steve, one guy who's been a little bit quiet in these sprints is Greg Henderson, the Kiwi on Lotto Belisol. And I was hoping to see him really mixing it up in some of these field sprints, especially yesterday. Maybe we'll see him today. How fast Tony Martin is still going, though, after being off the front for so incredibly long today.
Everybody's got a shot. Full pack together here as they come up on the back of Tony Martin. Wide road, so getting towards the front, moving into position shouldn't be all that difficult. No climbs.
But a lot more difficult than it looks, that's for sure.
No climbs to soften the legs today, so on balance, everyone should be feeling pretty decent. So the last dozen kilometers now coming up here in stage 6. Remember, the final 7K will see the road go up ever so slightly to a 2.5% grade. Final 4K offer up 6 pretty difficult turns, and then at 400 meters to go to the finish, there is a beyond 90-degree left-hand turn around a traffic circle that they will be seeing for the second time at that point. They'll also hit it going the other way with 3.5K to go. And remember, it's also slightly uphill in the last 2.5K before it flattens out near the finish, but that is very subtle.
Granted, he's the guy with the biggest bullseye on his back right now, as is his team, but they haven't done much work. And I think that he's the guy that's going to be propelled by the success from yesterday, and his teammates propelled by that as well.
Astana riding at the front in the red jersey, a few wheels back, overall leader Vincenzo Nibali. Saxo Bank, the team riding behind him in the yellow and dark blue. BMC with a few riders in the red and black over on the left.
I just noticed Greg Henderson on the right, as if on cue for Lotto Belisol, their sprinter for this race.
Tony Martin doesn't look like he wants to give anything up here.
No, he really doesn't. Just dangling out there.
And riding in the most comfortable position possible at the moment.
Yeah, I usually try and spend at least half of every ride sitting on the top two.
Absolutely. He is still pumping along at 40 miles per hour as the field hits the 10K to go banner.
Yeah, he's picked up a handful of seconds.
Well, again, look how much they're spread across the road. You don't see one sprinter's team really coming to the front with all of their riders and setting a heavy tempo right now.
Yeah, it's the battle for position back there where nobody wants to put everybody on the front and commit. But look at Tony Martin's ribs. He's a big guy, but notice his ribs right here. I'll get that arrow out of the way. Next time you see him, you can see with every breath his ribs sticking out. He's a big dude, but he's mighty lean.
And now the field starting to expand here. Stretching out a little bit more with just under 9 kilometers left to go. I tell you what, the field obviously still in good position to bring him back, but if there's one guy in the field that you don't want to give much leash to by playing any kind of games or waiting for other teams to do the work, it's Tony Martin. Because he could solo away before you know it. And again, we don't see one team up there really coming to the front right now. Lead at 17 seconds. It had come down to under 10. Looking around, waiting to see who's going to come to the front. Nobody wants to really lead it out at this point.
Well, Steve, they are giving him just that little bit of rope to get further up the road, but there's just no way he's going to hang off the front. The guys are going to suck him up eventually when the battle really starts. You can see some of his teammates now coming up on the left side of the peloton.
They obviously want to get Gianni Meersman a sprint win if they can, but again, you don't want to go to the front while you still have your teammate out there, but you also don't want to wait too long and then be out of position or miss out on a chance to sprint.
Everybody's trying to save their energy for when they think they can hold it to the line so fast that no other team will come over the top of them. Yesterday, Garmin did a bunch of work early, then they were kind of blown out. Then Omega Pharma Quickstep came to the front. They did a bunch of work. They lost control. Argo Shimano finished it off. Actually, Orica Green Edge was in there as well. So no one team was able to hold it to the line. It's very tough to get the timing, and there's a lot of back and forth in those lead-out trains.
Now Movistar riding at the front.
Well, Steve,
7 kilometers left to go, and the road now starting to go up ever so slightly, 2.5%.
I'd love to see Tony Martin hang on into the final kilometer and really push everybody behind to scramble. But even for a man of Tony Martin's skills, it's going to be so incredibly tough to pull this off after being off the front all day by himself.
Chris Horner. The long day and the lonely day out front for Tony Martin is about to end with 5 kilometers left to go on stage 6. Start to see some more technical corners coming up shortly as well.
What's amazing to me is how solid Tony Martin still looks. He really is not coming back on his own accord. It's just the fight for the field sprint that's bringing him back.
Cannondale with a rider at the very front, followed by Omega Pharma Quickstep, Vaca Soleil, Orica Green Edge among the teams near the front. Martin is back. Let's see what kind of calculus develops there at the front. Who wants to take control? What will the dynamic be?
A bunch of men for Lampre up there as well in that pink jersey for Riqueze. Riqueze second in that sprint. Yesterday has not picked up a win yet this year, but he's been knocking on the door.
Well, it was at 3 seconds, and it looked like they were about to catch him, but it's kind of holding here. The gap, at least for the moment, is not getting any smaller.
It puts a big smile on my face, I have to say, to see Tony holding everybody off. Even though it's against all odds that he'll make it to the finish line, he may make it into the very final meters of this race.
odds in his favor somewhat.
I think it helps him a little bit. Anytime he's out of their sight, and remember, he can take his perfect line through every single corner. But the guys at the front of the field, they also pretty much get their perfect line unless somebody comes inside of them at the last second and kind of upsets them. But good for Tony for hanging on. 8 seconds, he stretched it back out.
All right, Argo Shimano in the white now, riding at the front of the peloton. Just over 3 kilometers left to go.
He's starting to give me a little bit of hope, I have to say. It's not over till it's over.
Still 3K, a little more spread out here. Is one team going to really take control here? We have a Cofidis rider just going off the front by himself. Argo Shimano, it looked like, was trying to bring more riders to the front of the field. They have 4 riders in the white, but now chasing the Cofidis rider who just went over the top. Tony Martin is inside the final 3K. Again, it's slightly uphill at this point for Tony Martin.
Cofidis has Petit, who's a pretty good sprinter, but they have sprung one guy off the front now. Notice Tony, he's so exhausted at this point. On this little downhill, he coasts, he tucks for just a second, then he gets back on the power. And the Cofidis man almost sucked back up by the Argos train.
Any chance Tony Martin is going to hang on to this?
You know, I just can't imagine it happens. But the way he's riding, I'm starting to wonder.
So the Cofidis rider has been brought back. Now Argos with 4 riders at the front. Ramon Sinkeldam is their targeted sprinter for the day. 2 kilometers left to go for Tony Martin. Single file in the field behind. At one point, they had Martin back to just 3 seconds. They were right on his tail. And now he stretched it back out. At the 2K banner, it's 9 seconds.
Oh my. Oh my. You can also see Tyler Farah there in the blue for Garmin Sharp, right behind the lead-out train of the Argo Shimano guys in white.
There's a little disorganization at the front of this field with 1.5 kilometers to go.
Well, one of his guys just got to the front and just sort of moved over into the gutter and pinched some guys off.
They're not riding for Mearsman anymore.
No,
They're playing defense and riding for Tony Martin.
Indeed, Tony Martin has a legitimate shot at this, Steve. It's unbelievable.
He may hang on. No one team in control. His Omega Pharma Quick Step team playing defense for him with just over 1 kilometer left.
And indeed, it was Orica Green Edge going to the front for Michael Matthews. They see the clear and present danger, but they may have waited too long.
If there is one man you don't want to fool around with out front, it is the World Time Trial champion, Tony Martin. The only man in the breakaway all day long, and now a chance to hang on to get a solo win.
And total disorganization on the front right now. Rasmussen going to the front for a last dig for Tyler Farah as he knows this is almost over. Tony Martin may ride away with this.
Inside the final kilometer, there is that beyond 90-degree left-hand corner with 400 meters to go. Tony Martin still hanging on. At one point, his lead in the final kilometers was down under 5 seconds, and now here he is with a chance for the most improbable win. The World Time Trial champion, Tony Martin, the only man in the breakaway all day long, is hanging on to this advantage after almost 4 hours. Argo Shimano trying to close it down. Here comes the sprint behind him, but they waited too long. 200 meters to go. Now closing the gap here, but running out of road. Tony Martin desperately trying to hang on here. Radio Shack bringing a rider up. Is Tony Martin going to lose it right at the line? Oh, they come over the top. Saxo Bank gets the win.
It looked like Nicky Sorensen for Saxo Bank. Total chaos. I thought Martin was going to get it. Oh, that must have been a big bummer for the German. 110 miles off the front.
It looked like the special red and white jersey of Nicky Sorensen, who you certainly would not have predicted. It's Michael Morkov. Michael Morkov of Saxo Bank gets the win. Wow. Fabian Concha left-hand side of the screen, really engaged the sprint early.
Well, Cancellara went very long, and that's what made the difference for this sprint, as Morkov was sitting third wheel right behind Cancellara. Cancellara took a massive dig with Tony Martin still dangling off the front. Then Morkov comes up the right side and launches his sprint, which he has perfected on his track racing, which is where he comes from, and they go blowing by Tony Martin. And poor Martin.
Looking over his shoulder in the final 50 meters and just could not hang on. Instead, Michael Morkov picks up his first ever Grand Tour stage win.
Esta etapa, Michal Morkov. Michal, congratulations. Can you explain this strange win, this strange final?
Sure, it's also strange for me. I have to be honest and say that I was never participating really in a bunch sprint like this before, and yeah, I tried because I'm the only one for the team who can sprint, and for the end I had a really good position. I got in the wheel of Cancellara, and he took a long sprint, and I felt already on 90% on the wheel of him, and I knew that I would have a last kick, and it was just precise enough.
I suppose the most difficult was to decide the moment, the time to make the jump.
Yeah, when I jumped, I was actually a little bit unsecure if I did it too early. I was really exciting to see the finish line, but this was a really fast sprint. I think we had some tailwind, and it was really quick to the finish, and we just passed Tony Martin on the line, so he did a big effort as well.
Your most important win. What do you feel?
Yeah, I feel amazing, and it felt fantastic to raise my arm with this national Danish jersey at the finish line of this stage. I'm unbelievably proud and happy and really lucky.
I repeat, congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Just over 200 kilometers for this 7th day of racing, and like yesterday, not a single categorized climb on the profile.
Yeah, this one really looks like it's made for the sprinters. There is that little bump there fairly late in the race, but 10 or so kilometers to go. But it does look like a day for the sprinters, and they're going to want it because they're not going to have any opportunities for a bunch more days.
And this is live out on the road from the back of the field that is chasing a 3-man breakaway. They have pulled them to within 3 minutes with just over 63 kilometers now left to go. 3 riders in the breakaway today. Christian Nies, this German ride here for Team Sky, the 32-year-old, along with Marco Pinotti, the veteran for BMC, and Francisco Aramendia, the 26-year-old for Caja Rural. Went away much earlier in the stage, and the gap climbed a bit higher earlier in the day, now slowly and incrementally coming down just inside that 3-minute mark, and a long way to go. So the peloton not really concerned at this point. None of these 3 riders a big long-term threat on the general classification.
Aramendia, a man we've seen featuring in the breaks before. Now, Marco Pinotti here, Steve, a very interesting case. He is considering retirement, and he's just trying to make that decision. He has a very strong likelihood, he said, that this will be his last Grand Tour. He's not sure if he's going to race on a slightly less, well, let's say grand scale next year. But he's an engineer. He's known for his scientific approach to training and looking at his power meter right there. And we don't know if we're going to see him in another Grand Tour.
And this is Aramendia, the 26-year-old from the Caja Rural team. He was the most combative rider of last year's Vuelta a España, always trying to make a breakaway whenever he sees the opportunity. Found it today, and he's one of the 3 that have defined stage number 7 so far. And as far as what's at stake in today's racing, well, last sprint stage until day 12. So obviously that is certainly on the minds of the fastest men in the field. Philippe Gilbert, what's on his mind? Well, seems like he's pretty at ease right now, but probably a little stressed that he still has not won in the rainbow jersey of world champion and running out of time before the world championships come up late in September.
Well, he certainly didn't look like he was thinking much about bike racing there, did he? And these are those days where a lot of guys, especially with 3 guys off the front with 60K to go and only 3 minutes advantage, it's not too dangerous. So a lot of guys can be relaxed and just catch up with some of their friends in the peloton.
Bob Mollema talking with Dan Martin of the Garmin Sharp team. Conversation was. Not often do you get an opportunity to hear riders talking with one another like that. Couldn't really make it out. But
yeah, I couldn't either. It seemed like
to be a very important conversation, more lighthearted.
Well, they're typically fairly lighthearted until you get down to business late in the race, and then they're not really conversations anymore. Then they're incredibly short.
Once again, sunny skies, warm temperatures, and maybe one of the hottest days of the race so far because they are heading south into the Andalusia region where it really gets up there in terms of the temperature. And that is Vincenzo Nibali wearing the red jersey. 4th day in this first week. He is worn red. Former Vuelta winner and this year's champion at his home Grand Tour, the Giro d'Italia. So that's where we stand. 3-man breakaway, just over 3 minutes up the road now with just about 60 kilometers left to go on day 7 of the Vuelta. The main field led by Omega Pharma Quick-Step. They have our 3 leaders within 2 minutes with just over 40 kilometers left to go on this 7th day of the season's final Grand Tour. The race today, 206 kilometers long. One of only 2 stages at the Vuelta this year in excess of 200K. They have one more intermediate sprint to come. No categorized climbs. A largely flat day. Heading into the Andalusia region around Sevilla in southern Spain today. Warm temperatures, sunny skies. The Vuelta known for its rather short stages, not like the other Grand Tours where you get more that are over 200 kilometers. They tend to keep them short, succinct, and to the point.
Well, the idea there, Steve, is to make the racing a little bit more spirited and to really just sort of cut to the chase and let's get down to business. And these guys today will be out for about 122 miles, so it is a long day in the saddle, no doubt about it, and only 1 minute 45-second advantage for the breakaway trio. Not looking so good for them.
They will see the finish line for the first time at that second intermediate sprint, which comes with 31.4 kilometers left to go on the stage. And it's become a pattern in this first week of the Vuelta to make some interesting features stick out on the road. Some technical corners in the final 10K. There are 6 roundabouts within the last 3K today alone. The last one, turning right, is just 700 meters from the line. The road then bends slightly to the left at 300 meters. There's a big right-hand turn just inside of 1K to the line. So there are some turns to deal with inside the final few kilometers as you see how warm the temperature is now. Really getting up there at 37 degrees Celsius. Gogo, I'll let you do the conversion because mentally, if I try to do it on the fly in my head, I know I'd come up with some crazy number. So I'll let you take care of that.
You think you'd mess it up, huh?
I probably would. Instead, I'll just point out that we're under 40K to go.
Yeah, well, let's call it 99 degrees, so a nice hot day. And the other thing about the heat is that it gets the guys dehydrated, and tomorrow is a critical day. So today, a day before a big summit finish, everybody needs to be thinking long-term. They need to be thinking about how tough the race will be tomorrow and how they better get their, not only their calories today, but their liquids in.
Now, it's an interesting day because with the big mountain day tomorrow, you know the general classification riders are going to sit back and save themselves for the weekend. So you know you have to place a field sprint type of stage ahead of the mountains this weekend. Yet, what the organizers have done is not make it so straightforward, so textbook, that it becomes boring and predictable. They throw in those corners, a little undulation, some roundabouts, just to keep it open-ended and create enough variables that it still makes it interesting going into the finale on a day when you know it has to be a sprinter stage.
Indeed. And Steve, these race promoters that put these events together, they're thinking about a lot of different factors. They want to go to a certain town. They want to start in a certain town. They want to lead to an area where they can be close to the mountains and so on. And so they have to put that all into the hopper and figure out how to design the courses. And literally, they have people who go out the whole year, like right after this race is over, they start thinking about next year's race. And they go out and people who are really familiar with the countryside, and they start scouting for areas and roads that they can use in the next year's race. They ask towns for proposals to be part of the race. And they spend the entire next year preparing for the race as soon as this one is over.
Ah, yes. Piedra, who was, I believe, in the break for Caja Rural yesterday. He is from the finishing town today, has a lot of family and friends coming out, and they are coming into that finishing town now. You see the 8K banner just behind the riders. That is to where the finish line is set up. Again, they're going to go through it twice today. So the first time is just about 7 kilometers or so from where they are at this point. And that's going to be an intermediate sprint. They'll loop around the town and then come back around to finish the stage. So we'll see them hitting that intermediate sprint as we continue with our live coverage on the 7th day of the Vuelta here on Universal Sports. Live coverage of stage 7 of the Vuelta a España, brought to you by Earbuds. Almost 35 kilometers left to go. Gap hovering at just under 2 minutes now to our 3 breakaway riders. Again, Francisco Aramendia, Christian Nies, and Marco Pinotti, the day's defining break. Being chased by this peloton, Lampre in the pink and blue at the front. Garmin Sharp, Omega Pharma Quickstep, Argos, Movistar among the teams up there now, and just about 4 kilometers away from the second intermediate sprint, which is at the finish line of today's stage. So they're going to get a nice peek at what the run-in is going to look like when they come around the town and do it for real in just a little while. And it's a good thing we're going to have that dress rehearsal because, as I mentioned just a short while ago, a lot of turns and roundabouts to deal with in the final few kilometers. Even inside the final K itself, there's some turns that the riders will take note of because positioning later on in the sprint could be key to getting the win.
And have a look at this one right here, all the way around. It's a pretty big traffic roundabout, so it's not that big a deal. You can see most of the guys still pedaling through it. If it were a little bit smaller, that would be really tricky, but look at how small the roads are at this point.
Narrow and twisting.
Steve, you mentioned just a moment ago Antonio Piedra, the local man from the town. He described today's finale as full of traps.
So these 3 riders will be first through that sprint point at the line. Peloton rolls in behind him.
And Steve, those real narrow parts that they hit occasionally, those are the places where the peloton is going to be absolutely screaming before at such high speed, because all the riders know that if they're not in good positions where the road is narrow, there's no way at all to move up.
And again, earlier we saw Lee Howard of the Orica Green Edge team with the paper that had the profile and the map for today's stage out on his handlebars, looking at it, getting a sense of what was to come. So now they're going to get an actual look at what it will appear to be when they finish the stage. So it's an interesting time because the riders get to see it firsthand, then they can discuss it among themselves, have a conversation with the team director, and talk tactics out on the road once they make the big loop.
Indeed, and you can see like this right-hander here, and then where the front of the peloton is, that little tiny road. So they got to put that all into their memory, and they're going to have to make sure that they strategize accordingly for the final time they see it.
Just about 2 kilometers away for these 3 riders.
Yeah, Pinotti is a very interesting case study in a time trialist because he's not a big guy. He's on the front of this group right now, and yet he's a 6-time national time trial champion of Italy. And in fact, last year he looked like he was really on the way to a medal at the Worlds when he crashed out in the time trial. The thing about Pinotti is he's a perfectionist. He has a very slippery position. He's super aero. He gets very low and very narrow.
Now look how it's stretched out single file here, and this isn't even the end of the stage. Looks like the field now going under the 2K banner to where the finish line is positioned, but another roundabout just ahead of that. And our 3 leaders. Christian Nies pacing the way for Team Sky. Pinotti for BMC behind him, and then Armandia. Now the peloton really moving, but they should feel pretty good about the margin to these 3 riders right now as we're down to the final half K to the intermediate sprint for the breakaway.
I don't expect any of the guys in the break really too concerned. Maybe the Spaniard in the middle, Armandia, just to showboat a little in front of his home crowd because he's a Spanish rider. These guys really just trying to work very well together to stay away from the peloton more than anything.
Sprint. That will be the finish line in just over 30 kilometers from now, and seeing it for the first time as we just did, those final 500 meters didn't look too bad.
No, they really didn't, Steve, and it's also slightly uphill as well.
All right, so the 1K banner was right there. We saw the red kite as the field went through. Our 3 leaders have gone through the finish line. They're out on the loop now around town.
Say this brings back memories of feelings I had being in breakaways late in the race. You go through a big city like this with large crowds and everybody cheering for you, and it can just give you chills up and down your body because there's so much energy in that crowd, and their cheering is almost like transferring some of that energy to you to try and succeed.
So it's that turn, that right-hander with about 700 meters to go that looks like it's going to be the only difficult thing in the final kilometer in terms of messing up a potential sprint, as Katusha will lead the field across the line now.
Yeah, just that slight little bend there in sight of the finish line, but pretty wide, pretty good for a big bunch finish. Pretty straightforward. It should be down to the fast men, but hey, it was pretty straightforward yesterday too, and it was a very unusual finish after all.
Well, they only have 6 seconds at the 5K banner, so that's plenty of time for this field to bring them back.
Yeah, a lot of different teams now coming into the mix. Orica Green Edge could not do it on their own. So now it's Movistar up there.
Looks like Valverde was second wheel. This is that roundabout we saw before where they went all the way around. So several roundabouts and some technical corners, but the final kilometer, not as bad as the initial profile indicated. They have a turn at 700 meters to go, but it looks like the sprint should be pretty straightforward if it comes down to that. Joubert and Stybar still hanging on out front with 4K left.
Steve, the course may be pretty straightforward, but I just wonder how straightforward the eventual sprint will be if they catch the 2 leaders, because you look at the front of the field, 2 Movistar, 1 Lampre, 1 Euskaltel. There is no team up there with strength in numbers. It is completely mixed up right now.
And if that's the case and it continues this way, it's going to come down to positioning and just all-out speed.
Indeed, and now I'm seeing 3 Skymen up there for Edvald Boassenhagen in the black with a blue vertical stripe. He's the guy who's been trying for it as well.
It may be a freelance opportunity that a rider takes to springboard to a win. But first, they have to catch these 2 riders who are still leading with 3K left.
And this is that section coming off of those bricks and cobbles there that the peloton is really sketchy. And look at Philippe. Boy, he does have some good form. There's no doubt about it. He is absolutely smoking. Now 3K to go.
All around these tight corners and the narrow roads, hard to tell exactly what their advantage is over the peloton. Well, now it's 12 seconds, so they've doubled their advantage from the last benchmark on the road. Under 3 kilometers left. They're making it interesting here.
Movistar still on the front right now with 2 guys, and that's not going to bring back the breakaway. There's no way that if we see it like this much longer, those Movistar guys can't do it. They need a team with several guys or a few teams to come to the front right now. This is touch and go.
Not many other teams for the pure sprinters can do it. This is Dan Martin, who crashed. Number 111 has teammates with him trying to get back up into the field here.
That's not looking good for him.
The top sprinters teams just don't have that collective strength right now to come to the front. Orica Green Edge, one of the only teams that can do it. They were riding at the front a short while ago, but now they've dropped off.
Indeed, this is looking actually pretty good right now for the breakaway duo of Gilbert on the front, Stybar behind him, a Belgian and a Czech rider there.
They're adding to their lead here. 16 seconds. They may take it.
I think they have a very good shot at this point, Steve. They are really flying right now. And you know what? Gilbert has to be careful. He's a good finisher, but he cannot underestimate the newfound speed of Zdeněk Stybar. Stybar was not used to sprinting on the road, and he found something he didn't know he had at Eneco Tour.
And Gilbert has been doing more work than Stybar. He's been at the front of that duo more than he's been sitting on. And he was the man who made the initial acceleration that Stybar followed. Here they are with 1.5 kilometers left to go.
Oh, it is definitely going to be down to the wire.
Just like yesterday.
Oh, my goodness.
And again, it's an Omega Pharma Quick-Step rider. Yesterday it was Tony Martin. Today, Stybar. He's got company in Gilbert. They're trying to steal it from the sprinters here. And coming up on the final kilometer. And no organized chase by one sprinter's team behind.
Oh, that plays beautifully into the hands of the breakaway duo. It still doesn't mean they've got it made, but it definitely helps them stay away.
There's the red kite, just over half a mile to the finish. I think they got it.
Yeah, at this point, I would agree with you. They have it. It's Orica on the front, FDJ there in the second spot. And then Argos, so...
Who are you thinking, Gogo? Stybar, Gilbert?
I would really like to see the lead duo and see if Stybar is sitting on at this point or if he is still swapping poles. If he's not swapping poles, he could take Philippe.
All right, there's an FDJ rider in the blue who's launched a move from the field now. The cat and mouse. And they can't play games for much longer here because now the train is in full effect at 0.5 kilometer to go. FDJ, Argos chasing. Gilbert and Stybar trying to hang on here.
Well, Stybar is in the perfect position, not having to do any work, but are they going to get caught?
They can't wait. They got to go. Now Stybar accelerates past Philippe Gilbert. Gilbert's second wheel at 150 meters left to go. Stybar trying to pull away. Here comes the pack behind him. Zdeněk Stybar watches Gilbert come up alongside and at the finish line. Stybar
Stybar denying the reigning world champion. I tell you what, the Czech rider is really showing something special this year, Steve.
Yesterday, Omega Pharma Quickstep's Tony Martin was just caught at the line. Today, his teammate Stybar just survives at the finish to get the win. The 27-year-old from the Czech Republic, Zdeněk Stybar, coming off his overall win at the Eneco Tour just prior to the Vuelta, now gets a stage win here on the 7th day of the Spanish Grand Tour, coming around Philippe Gilbert at the very end. Once again denying a reigning world champion an elusive win in the rainbow jersey. And he is our performance of the day, presented by Earbuds. It was close, because they were coming.
He was very much in that position where he had to jump. He sat on Gilbert, waited as the charge came. He kept looking back, and then right at the last moment, he said, okay, I gotta go now. And they were so close to the finish line, Gilbert could not recover, close the gap, and get around him.
Gilbert almost did come around him, though. Right here. Boy, it was close.
It's funny how it works like that, but that's when everybody has everything on the line. There's no categorized climbs over the first 95 miles of the race, but the last 9, which brings them up to 104 for the total, is that big climb, 3,150 feet of vertical, and that one is going to create a little bit of separation. It starts out quite hard. The 12.5% is early on, and then it levels off a little bit.
And we are looking down live at the Peloton on a sunny and hot day in southern Spain. And as far as what is at stake in this stage number 8, I think the big thing is the unknown climb at the end that should really heat up the general classification. May not decide it, but it's a climb that's never been used before in the Vuelta. A lot of these riders, even many of the Spaniards, don't know the climb, so that always adds that element of mystery and intrigue.
Indeed, I talked with Chris Horner's director yesterday. I asked if he had seen the climb, and he said no, they've seen video of the climb. Same thing for Belkin, for Valkmolema. They hadn't seen the climb either. They had video of the climb that they were reviewing. So that tells me 2 things. 1, they're busy guys and they don't have time to go look at all the courses. And 2, maybe they don't think it's going to be incredibly selective, but that also throws a little bit of an unknown into it as well.
There is a little more than 40 kilometers left to go on the stage, and this Peloton is just over 4 minutes behind our largest breakaway of the race so far. 13 riders up the road today. The team in the turquoise, that is Astana, the team of overall race leader Vincenzo Nibali, wearing a red jersey today, staying near the front of the Peloton. But so far in this first week, the size of the breakaways have been pretty small. 4 or 5 guys, even a 1-rider breakaway in Tony Martin just a couple of stages ago. There is Joaquim Rodriguez in the red and white of Katusha, team leader of that squad, riding alongside his trusty teammate Daniel Moreno. And actually Moreno in the white jersey could be a better candidate for the stage win than Perito here today. This climb really doesn't suit Rodriguez as much as some of the other climbs later in the race because of its steady gradients near the finish. He likes the short, punchy, explosive climbs that are short and steep just near the top.
Indeed, and you saw Moreno in a different jersey, the white jersey, as the leader of the combination category, which is the guy who has the smallest number of the sum of their position in general classification, mountains, and points. And he's been very consistent, also has won a stage so far in this year's Vuelta.
All right, the gap slowly coming down. Its largest margin was 4.5 minutes at 1 point, but 13 riders up the road, the Peloton in pursuit, and still 40 kilometers left to go on stage 8 of the Vuelta. 13 Vuelta a España on Universal Sports is presented by Earbuds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop. And now, on to an increasingly popular segment here on our Vuelta coverage, Ask Gogo, or Stump Gogo as I prefer. We take your tweets, we read them on the air, and Gogo interacts. And this next week, tweets here on stage number 8 coming from Andrew. What's the strategy behind the breakaways? They never make it, and don't they just wear themselves out more? Go-Go? What say you?
They absolutely do wear themselves out, and in a 3-week race like the Vuelta a España, it can actually cause guys not to be able to finish the full 3 weeks of racing because they get so tired from being in breaks. But the reason they do that is because once in a while they are successful. They get their name out there, they get their team out there and their sponsors. And when you look at all these riders from up above here, Lampre, BMC, Vacan Soleil, Omega Pharma, whatever the team is, they're putting a lot of money into these teams. Over $10 million in most of the team's budgets in this bike race. And they got to pay for it somehow. So one way to do that is to put a guy in the break.
And sometimes a rider may be going through his hometown or have friends and family out on the course, so they want to be out front when the race goes through. There's many different reasons why you may be in the breakaway outside of just trying to win a stage.
Yeah, and on top of that, let's take a couple of days ago when Tony Martin did a almost 110-mile individual time trial effort. That meant that his teammates didn't have to chase all day. And in very many situations, if your team doesn't have to chase, then if you do get caught from that break later on, one of your teammates can win the race because they're fresh and they've been able to ride the wheels of the other guys who are chasing.
It's been very exciting almost every single day, especially at the end of the stages in our first week, with Tony Martin getting caught right at the line, with Philippe Gilbert and Zdeněk Štýbar yesterday battling it out right before the field was about to catch them at the end of yesterday's stage 7. One true sprint stage won by the Aussie Michael Matthews, an up-and-coming sprinter. So we've seen a lot of action, a lot of drama, and a lot of excitement in the first week. And hey, as we get into week number 2 today, this is where the real racing is about to begin. So the best is yet to come.
Indeed, a lot of guys are going to start to get sorted out over these next 4 days of racing that we have up until the time trial on stage 11. We're going to see a lot of changes, and we're going to start to see who is really in this race with the legs to get it done.
And let's consider the possibilities of the next 3 days in particular. Michael Charel, number 15 of AG2R, sitting back in the field here. 3 straight summit finishes today, tomorrow, and on Monday. 3 increasingly difficult mountain stages from today through tomorrow into Monday. They get harder every single day by just a little bit every day. So if you're a general classification rider, you've been biding your time so far, how do you approach these next 3 days? What are you looking to do tactically?
I think today you're looking to follow a little bit and not lose time, but not necessarily gain a bunch of time. And let's just note here that Mathieu Boucher picked up that intermediate sprint there along the way from the breakaway group, but I'm sure they weren't really sprinting for it. The guys are really just trying to stay away from the peloton, most likely. But so today, to answer your question, Steve, you want to mark the other guys that are dangerous. If you're in trouble, you try and let a guy go who's maybe just a little bit less of a favorite at the end, and then maybe we get another unusual person to snatch a stage victory. And as we get closer to Monday, so the next 2 stages, you can start thinking about being more aggressive. But if you're super aggressive on today's climb, you might be vulnerable tomorrow or the next day.
So we're down to the final 35.5 kilometers of stage 8, and this big breakaway, watching their time slip away ever so slightly, 3:22 up the road. And Horner now just 3 seconds off the general classification lead of Vincenzo Nibali, sitting in 2nd place as we come into another summit finish on stage number 8. And with time bonuses, it's certainly a possibility that he could take back that red jersey, and he says he's going to try. He wants to go for it today, get that red jersey back, especially because of the way he lost it with the gap that occurred on stage number 4 at the finish. And that's the reason that Nibali is wearing red today and not Horner.
Yeah, Steve, it was really a shame, and I actually spoke with Jose Acevedo, his director, yesterday, and just checked in with him, asked him how Chris was doing, and he said Chris is really good right now. His condition is good, he's recovering well, and he's looking to go for it today. And Acevedo was pretty disappointed the way there was that split in the peloton in that finishing day on stage 4, the day after Chris picked up the jersey. So he ended up losing it on a finish where nobody really expected that. Even Vincenzo Nibali had left the stage because he didn't know he was back in the jersey.
They were all coasting across the finish line. Everybody thought that they got the same time, but it was determined there was a small gap between Nibali's group and Horner's group, just enough for Nibali to take back the red jersey. So Horner in second place instead of first as we come to the summit finish on stage number 8.
And Steve, you know, like I was talking about Leopold Koenig earlier and how it looks like we got a crash here maybe on the back of the peloton. If not a crash, certainly a major bottleneck.
Enough to slow the guys down here at the very tail end of the race. And it's Reinhard van Rensburg of Argo Shimano who's in the white there. And well, here in the green, this is Michael Matthews, the leader of the points competition and the sprinter for Orica Greenedge, who was also caught back there.
Yeah, Christian Knies, the man for Sky, who was in the break yesterday, and it is going fast. So let's see if we actually, oh yeah, we did have a couple guys. It looks like they just got stuck there with that guardrail. I'm telling you, man,
a little fender bender.
It is not easy to get through these towns with all the traffic control devices when you're in a peloton of 175 guys. You just get pushed out and squeezed, and guys make mistakes, and they're just riding so close together.
And you were going to say about Horner?
Well, what I was going to say about Horner is it's a very similar story to what I was saying about Leopold Koenig, who has his NetApp team on the front, and he's hoping, I think, he's hoping that he can fly under the radar a little bit of the true favorites and try and pick up a stage win. And Horner at the start of the race today said the same thing. He goes, you know what? Nibali is going to be watching Rodriguez and Valverde more than they're going to be watching Horner, and he's hoping he can capitalize. Even though he's already won a stage and been the race leader, he's not looked at as one of the 3 biggest favorites. He's just that half a step below them for the general classification, and he's hoping that he can capitalize on that fact.
Well, the riders coming into the town of Estepona, where the second located at 19 kilometers from the finish. As you might have guessed, a very popular resort and holiday town. Over 20 kilometers of beaches, harbors, and coastline here in southern Spain. And ironically enough, this city was actually chosen by the Walt Disney Organization in the early 1990s as the original site for the Euro Disney project before it later went to Paris, where it's now become a fixture. So they were originally going to put Euro Disney here instead of Paris.
No kidding.
I would not kid you, Gogo. Especially not about Disney World.
You wouldn't? Well, you know, maybe they should have put it here because it seems like it's struggled a little bit in Paris, hasn't it? Do you know about their financial situation?
Well, the breakaway here, not contesting the field sprint, but I would have loved to have seen Space Mountain off to the right as the riders rolled through here in the Vuelta.
Exactly. Right there, sort of hovering over the water.
So, getting down to the final 20K of racing. That means just about half a dozen kilometers from the start of that last climb. The Peñas Blancas. First time it's ever featured in the Vuelta a España. A climb of 14.5 kilometers, averaging 6.5%, but hits a maximum of 12.5% in the first 2K before it steadies out the rest of the way between about 6 and 8%.
And Steve, look at the peloton. It is totally strung out. Cannondale came to the front with a lot of men. They still have 2 men on the front, but everybody now scrambling for position because they know this thing's going to come blowing apart at the bottom of the climb.
Our leaders. Starting the climb with a 1-minute advantage.
And you can see just how narrow it was back there. That also makes things sketchy in the peloton. As you can see, the Garmin Sharp rider there getting rid of any extra weight. Alex Howes, the American, got rid of some food and things he wasn't going to be able to eat at this point in the race, but picking up a bottle there to cool off with.
Now Radio Shack coming to the front of the main field, riding for Chris Horner.
Very interesting to see, and look at all the men they have on the front for Radio Shack. At least 4 of them up there.
Katusha also working at the front of the field for Joaquim Rodriguez, their overall leader.
Look at the gap just plummeting now as riders take these really hard pulls on the front of the peloton, and then they just swing off and get dropped.
Looks like Horner is second wheel there. He is indeed. And then Joaquim Rodriguez a few wheels back for Katusha. This is up to the very front of the stage. Azanza for the Euskaltel squad. This is the steepest part of the climb where it gets over 12%. The 13-rider breakaway now seeing cracks form in the foundation. And 4 riders for Radio Shack now at the front. Chris Horner, second wheel again. Right behind Fabian Cancellara, who is leading the way.
Boy, Cancellara has some great form right now, I have to say. He is going to be tough to beat at the Worlds.
Vincenzo Nibali also there near the front in the red jersey as the overall race leader for Astana. Today, he can kind of sit back, mark wheels, and ride more conservatively. He doesn't need to take time. He can just play it easy here and follow the riders that are his main rivals.
Indeed, it puts him in a very enviable position. Now, let's remember that Chris Horner has a teammate up the road in Matthew Boucher in this breakaway group. So if this group had a little bit more of an advantage coming into the climb, that could potentially really be a big benefit for Chris. But with them being so close, it may not actually help. But you know, if Chris can get across and get the help of Boucher, it could propel him up the road.
Other riders starting to lose some contact with the main field as it gets stretched out on the lower slopes of this climb. Horner with teammates at the front, 3 seconds behind Nibali on the general classification. Coming up to the steep point now, where it gets up close to 12% and beyond.
And who said Fabian Cancellara couldn't go uphill, as he's still at the front of the peloton, sitting second wheel when so many guys have already been dropped. That's the thing about Spartacus. He can go up a short hill very rapidly.
The breakaway group had a lead of 4.5 minutes at one point earlier in the stage. It's down under a minute now with 13.5 kilometers remaining. Radio Shack and Astana, the 2 teams with most riders at the front of the field. World champion Philippe Gilbert, number 51 in the rainbow jersey. After finishing second on yesterday's stage, he is having some trouble on this climb.
Yesterday he did look very good, and I think he has a great shot at winning a stage later on in this year's Vuelta.
Now back to the front.
Cataldo really starting to stretch some legs.
Again, he won stage 16 of the Vuelta last year, the 28-year-old Italian for Team Sky. Now setting the pace as the breakaway starts to lose some riders.
Cataldo's a very good climber, Steve, and he's starting to show that right now. He's finished 12th overall in the Giro d'Italia last year.
All right, Alejandro Valverde is there, number 1 in the dark colors with the green helmet for Movistar. Joaquim Rodriguez in the red and white of Katusha right behind him. Off to their right, overall race leader Vincenzo Nibali.
And Christian Meyer coming back from the breakaway group. The very effective Domestique on the Orica Green Edge team that usually we see on the front of the field all day, but today he was in the break.
This is live coverage of stage number 8 of the Vuelta a España here on Universal Sports, presented by Earbud. Steve Schlanger alongside Todd Gogulski. We are down to the final 13 kilometers. The breakaway coming apart. Their lead under 1 minute to this main field. All of the top general classification riders are here.
Look at Fabian Cancellara. After all that work, he's just going to have to just kind of ride within himself here. He'll lose some time today. Not a big deal for him, though.
So Boucher at the front, team leader Horner behind. And 22 seconds to these three leaders with 8.5 kilometers now left to go. And from here, it's a pretty steady slope, between 7 and 8% most of the way, and that's the average gradient.
Look at this, Kreuziger in trouble. Roman Kreuziger, the leader of Saxo Tinkoff. Very unexpected to see him in trouble. He's a guy who came into today 42 seconds down. The general classification hope for that team, and he looks like he's starting to crack.
Not their highest GC rider. That's Nicholas Roach at 8 seconds back in 3rd place overall, but Kreuziger really their long-term overall threat, and now that may be slipping away.
Yeah, very surprising to see Kreuziger in that position. Especially, look at the size of this group. This could be 40 guys still left in this group.
That's certainly a surprise. Well, Horner looking back to see exactly who's with him and how many. And these are the riders losing time with 8K left.
A lot of damage being done. Matteo Monteguti there, coming off number 18. The NetApp man, 156, is Bartosz Huzarski. He was in the early break and then did a bunch of work chasing at the front of the peloton. Well, let's see if that NetApp work pays off for them, if Leopold Koenig is able to transform this mountain into a big stage win for him and his team.
All right, the clock starts for our three leaders at the 8K banner. Let's see how far back the overall contenders are in the field. Now, Luis Mate is the name written on the road as the field comes through 17 seconds down. Mate, by the way, one of the only riders who really knows this clock. He lives near here, rides it in training a few times a week, and Bach Mollema now going to the frontier. Team leader for the Belkin team, making acceleration.
Big acceleration there by him. I talked with his director yesterday, Steve, Eric Decker, just to check in, see how Mollema was doing. He says he's feeling great. First 7 stages have been good for him. And he said this stage was a new chapter of the bike race with a longer and harder climb and many more to come. But he said Mollema's feeling very good.
All right, this is still the front of the race. Our three riders who just went out of the frame on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, the small group of general classification contenders, next group on the road. So Mollema was making that acceleration, but he's a little way back.
Okay.
So he was making an acceleration, but he's a little behind the other GC riders, it appears.
Yeah, it does appear that way. He just was trying to get back up in there. Mollema is a guy who's good on both long climbs, and he's also very punchy and explosive, but we haven't really seen much long climbing yet in this race, and maybe he's just having an off day.
How about Chris Horner, still second wheel, and teammate Fabian Cancellara pacing him earlier. Now Matthew Boucher, who's come back from the original breakaway, he's helping the American out at the front.
It's great to keep your team leader right at the front like that so he can respond to any attacks, and he's out of the wind. And that's the benefit of having Boucher up the road in that early breakaway. He can soft pedal just a little bit on the climb when it got really hard, go back, and then have that extra bit of freshness to help out Horner.
Peñas Blancos climb being used for the first time ever in the Vuelta a España here today on stage number 8.
Beñat and Chosti struggling for Movistar coming off. And, you know, he finished 10th overall last year.
7K left for the small peloton. And it looks like Valls is now gone. So it's Nares here at the front, followed by Cataldo.
Oh, look at Nares just grinding the massive gear out of the saddle. And you can see Cataldo just spinning away. But Boucher still a trusty teammate.
The two Americans, Boucher and Horner, at the front of the general classification group. And boy, they are coming up on the back of our two leaders very quickly here. Just 10 seconds down now with 6.5 kilometers left.
Well, it looked like it was never to be for that breakaway group to succeed. But certainly Cataldo and Nares have put in a big effort on this climb. And I got to say, having Boucher there at the front of the field for Horner right now is massive for the American.
Dominic Nares at one point was the virtual overall race leader on the road when that 13-man breakaway had 4.5 minutes. That was earlier in the stage, and Nair starting the day 2:57 behind the man in the red jersey there, Vincenzo Nibali. But the gap has now almost been entirely reduced because of the pressure being applied by this field with Radio Shack at the front. Nibali, fourth wheel from the front of the peloton right now in the red jersey.
And really the entire pressure from the peloton on the climb has been put on by Radio Shack. It's been one of just 3 guys from that team who's been on the front driving the chase and reducing the peloton. And now we're looking at maybe 25, 30 guys left, probably about 30 left in that peloton. You can see the colors of the Dutch national road champion Johnny Hogerland hanging on to the back of that group.
And here they come. You see him on the right-hand side of the screen, led by Radio Shack. That small, reduced main field. Bringing back our 2 leaders. Dialing them in with 6 kilometers now remaining to the summit finish. There's Sammy Sanchez, number 91 for Euskaltel. This is a climb that would typically suit him, but not riding at the front right now.
Yeah, he has not had very great legs, that's for sure. We saw him crack on the very first summit finish of the race and lost almost a couple of minutes there, and it's just been hard for him so far in this race. But if we move up to the front, there's Chris Horner out of the saddle. He does a lot of out of the saddle riding, the American. You notice when he won stage 3, he was out of the saddle probably about the final kilometer of the bike race. It was the same when he won the Sierra Road climb back in 2011 at the Tour of California, and he went on to win that race overall.
Well, considering what's happening right now, it looks like our stage winner is going to come from the reduced main field of general classification contenders. So that means that we also have a possibility of the race lead changing hands today, because there are riders within time bonus proximity of the red jersey. So we could see things shuffling in the general classification just a bit here. Time bonuses available at the line of 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3.
Now, there are only 2 guys in the general classification that are within 10 seconds of the overall leader, and that's Vincenzo Nibali. So Horner's 3 seconds down, and Roach is 8 seconds down. So if either of those guys gets the maximum time bonification of 10 seconds, and Nibali doesn't get a time bonification, well, then we'll have a new race leader. But there should be some kind of separation at the finish line as well. I don't think they're going to ride it all the way up and just sprint it out.
Well, also the possibility of Nibali getting dropped as well. So that brings more guys into time bonus proximity of perhaps moving forward if Nibali shouldn't be able to hold the wheels of some of these other top GC riders here in the final 5K. The handshake signifies that the breakaway is finally over. The 2 remnants of what was a 13-man group earlier in the stage about to be caught. Dario Cataldo and Dominic Nares. Small field of overall hopefuls coming through with 5 kilometers left to go to the summit finish that's being used for the first time ever in the Vuelta a España, the Peñas Blancas. And the first of 3 straight summit finishes on this second weekend of the season's 3rd Grand Tour. Look how small this group is now at the front of the race. And a lot of the general classification hopefuls are right here. Chris Horner, the American for Radio Shack, who wore the red jersey for 1 day, his second wheel. Vincenzo Nibali, the current overall leader, is right there near the front in a red jersey at the 5K banner. You also have Ivan Basso in the green for Cannondale, the 2-time winner of the Giro d'Italia. Joaquim Rodriguez of Katusha, the Spaniard in search of his first ever Grand Tour title, is in this group. And so is Alejandro Valverde, former Vuelta winner, wearing number 1 for Movistar, also looking very good in this group right now. There is Rodriguez in the red and white, right behind Valverde, who's in the dark blue and the green for Movistar. Sammy Sanchez, number 91, who we just mentioned for the Euskaltel team, starting to move up now in the group.
Interesting to see how far back Valverde and Rodriguez are. They're kind of in the middle of this group. It's only Horner of the true big favorites. It's Horner and Nibali up in the top. But not the other guys. Now there goes Antone.
Igor Antone, the first acceleration from this group of general classification contenders, coming just inside of 5K from the finish.
It looks like there's a response there from NetApp, but I do not believe that is Leopold Koenig. I think that is David De La Cruz on that squad who's going.
Antone, 5:42 down on the general classification, so not an immediate threat here to the lead of Vincenzo Nibali. That's an Argos Shimano rider.
Well, Warren Barguil, the young man on the Argos team, was one of the guys they wanted to see just how he would perform on this climb today. He's kind of an unknown quantity in this type of competition with a climb like this.
Well, the Euskaltel team is disbanding at the end of the season, looking for some final results to go out on a high. And that is Barguil of the Argos Shimano team, now second on the road behind Antone with 4K left. There's Antone in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Well, the Euskaltel team has had a tough start to this Vuelta with the time lost by their overall leader, Sammy Sanchez. Antone, a couple of years ago, led this Vuelta before crashing out almost inexplicably when he was wearing the overall leader's jersey. Looked like he was in position to maybe go on to win the race overall, and he's never really been the